A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Yes, we do love to honour people who are foster carers, foster families. I want to draw attention to them today. Lots of churches are getting on board and marking a day that's coming along now each year. It's called Foster Care Sunday. And this year, Foster Care Sunday is on Sunday the 14th of September. So really good and timely now, around 6 weeks out from that, for churches to get involved in this and just make some provision in a service to be able to honour people who are foster carers. Well, our special guest today says foster caring is a demonstration of the church across Australia coming together in unity to focus on God's heart for vulnerable children in our communities. Mary Blake is the founder and executive officer for Fostering Hope. She's a foster parent too, with 5 active boys. She founded Fostering Hope after studying community development and international law. And she's joining us. Mary, a special welcome back to 2020.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me today.
Mary, 5 foster boys. Anyone who's a parent of any boys knows that you've got your hands full. What does your day-to-day routine look like with 5 active boys?
So not all are through care. So in the mix there's 2 biological sons as well. But yes, the days routine and structure are very important, getting everyone out the door in the mornings and off to school. And then I'm very lucky I just work while they're at school and then drive everyone around after school.
You are literally mum's taxi. What ages are they?
Yep, 9, 11, 15 and 2 17-year-olds.
All right, so when we talk sport, practice sessions weekday afternoons and actual fixtures on the weekend, does this sort of, does this take up a lot of your time? I mean, I think it's probably all consuming, but, that's pretty demanding, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They're active boys, lots of after school activities, lots of weekend activities. The eldest is right into his drama, and so being in year 11 this year, there's lots of drama as well. And but it's great fun for me. I'm to be able to be present with them and be there with them is great.
And just as we're getting context today, because I'm going to invite listeners to join into our conversation. So you're fostering. You've got these 5 boys. 2 of them your own biological sons. Are they the eldest, or where do they fit in the mix, your own biological sons? Some people think, where they fit in the mix might even determine whether they'll actually take on some foster care. What's the mix look like for you?
Yeah, so the middle 2, the 15 and 17-year-old. So definitely when people think about fostering, it's talked about to not mess up your birth order of your kids. My eldest son, who's 17 as well, he went to the same primary school as my kids. So when things were hard for his mum, I was actually trying to help her out. And so when he was actually removed from her, she asked and he asked if he could come and live with us, because we were already fostering and part of his community. God's hands on it, so it's worked out really well. They went to primary school together and they've gone to different high schools. And they would both say, if you ask them what's the weirdest thing about fostering, it's when they have to explain why they have a brother the same age as them.
Yes. Hey, in Australia, we are currently losing more carers every year than we're able to retain. I wonder if you've got any reflection around that, because this is why it might be really important to talk about, Foster Care Sunday coming up, because there's a desperate need, isn't there, for more carers?
Yes, you're exactly right, Neil. We have across Australia a declining number of carers, new carers entering the system, and an increasing number of foster carers exiting the system. And what that means is children, rather than being put in families, in home-based care, family-based care, which we know leads to the best outcomes, they're being put into residential care with rostered workers. And yeah, as you say, this is Foster Care Sunday coming up on the 14th of September is a great day for churches to raise awareness about this need, have the conversation, talk about it, encourage their people to pray about it, pray what their role might be.
Hey, with the number of kids who are vulnerable and in need, what happens to kids when there is no foster family available? Authorities have got to deal with all sorts of different and challenging situations. Every story, might have some similarities, but every story is different. What happens to kids when there's no family available to take on a fostering role?
Yeah, so unfortunately in Australia, those children end up in what's called residential care. So that is a home that's run by a community organisation that would have rostered workers. So they'd have workers that would do 24-hour shifts, and those workers are doing the best they can, but there's no one adult advocating for that child or caring for that child or making sure those children that long-term care and looking forward, and adding to that, it's also really expensive compared to putting children in families as well.
We might be thinking, with the numbers of families lower and the number of vulnerable children on the rise, is this a national crisis? How do you monitor this? Is there any sort of research that identifies what crisis levels are? How do you describe it?
So I base it on the research that's out there, which Australian Health Institute are all saying we're at crisis level in Australia. And just in preparing for this, I read this quote: "The current shortage of foster carers is not the result of poor marketing or cold-hearted Australians. It's driven by macro drivers and requires systemic changes." So it's a whole lot of factors in Australia. It's not people, what was often in the media, the housing crisis. People don't have a spare bedroom. Both parents are working. The improvement in different fertility options means families who potentially would have looked at foster care don't need to anymore. And it's a really challenging situation that we're facing right now.
And you're a part of a local church in Hobart, and they've no doubt got you whispering in their ear saying, hey, we need to be aware of the circumstances around our own community to be able to take action where we can. And I know you wouldn't be wanting to put a rod across anyone's back of condemnation if they're not actually responding in a moment like this. But is it, when we come back to the scriptures, the one that stands out most, James chapter 1, verse 27, true religion described as visiting orphans and widows in their affliction and keeping oneself unstained from the world. When you're talking to Christians about foster care, a scriptural foundation like that, describing true religion, that's got to be an effective starting point. How do you reflect on that when you get to talk to groups of Christians and talking about foster care?
Exactly what you just said, and not wanting to put when you started that with not wanting to put a rod there. This is a real need, and Christians can respond to it. And I think we have the opportunity we're called to be salt and light in our community and live counterculturally. And what we have a driver, a motivation within us to care for the vulnerable. Also, we were all, out of God's family and brought into his family. And if anyone, I think, in the community has the means to be able to do this, I think the church in Australia could really respond to this need. And not just individual Christians. To become foster carers, what we often talk about is how can you support the fostering families in your community? Could you mentor a child? Could you just received a lovely photo the other day of a older lady in a church who responded by offering to do some gardening, and she's now known as the garden fairy, and she's gardening for foster carers in our community, and the kids are loving it as well. There's this lovely older lady now that's part of their life. So how can, it might not be fostering, but these are still vulnerable kids, and how can you support them?
You just drew attention to another really significant biblical Christian concept that we all understand. We were all separated, but God adopts us into his family. And adoption, while that's actually not even well represented in Australia, and people who want to adopt tend to have to go offshore, adoption and foster caring, well, these are a little bit similar. How do you describe any sort of similarities or the differences between, adopting a child and being a foster carer? Because sometimes it's short term and sometimes it's long term, isn't it?
Yeah, so one of the things I talk about with people thinking about entering foster care is to have the frame, you're going to be a family for a child, not get a child for your family. So that then means as long as that child needs your family, you can be there for them. But the motivation is, I guess, more selfless than wanting to get a child to fill your family. And that having that as part of the motivation isn't bad or wrong or anything. And being aware that there is a birth family there who to respect and potentially have an opportunity to care for and definitely pray for. And if a birth family can do the right things to address the safety concerns and have their child returned, that can be an amazing outcome for everybody.
There's another scripture, Psalm 82 verse 3 urges, defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. There are scriptures, and you don't have to dig very deep to find those, that ought to cause our heartstrings to respond in some way here. And I love your quote, be a family for a child, not a child for your family. There's somehow or other that's calling on those altruistic motives of an individual as a parent and as a family that says we're not trying to get this child for our family, but being a family for the child. That's a different way of thinking about things. How do you find people respond when the penny drops and they understand this is what you're trying to do with foster care?
I think that makes sense for a lot of people, and hopefully then sets people up with the right expectations. And I encourage anyone who's thinking about fostering to pray about it, but also talk to people in their community, talk to their extended family, a couple of people at church, and start having other people pray over the process, and preparing your heart correctly for what you're going to do.
What's the typical age of people who are getting involved in foster care? Is it those who've already had their children grown up and they're thinking, what am I called to do right here now? Or is it people who are actually in the family environment that don't see it as too big an effort to actually introduce one or two more children into their family?
A whole range, and also people that can't have their own children, biological children, the whole mix. There often is a push for the baby boomers, so people whose kids have left home, to consider it. And I would just encourage people at that stage of life to have really open conversations with their adult children, because when grandkids come along, that can get I've seen that get really tricky. So you've got to make sure that your adult children are also on board with that decision to foster. And we also across Australia there's full-time carers, which is what I am, but there's also respite carers. So respite carers are people who offer respite to the full-time family, and it's generally one weekend a month. And that's respite. If respite that's done well is kind of like that natural extended family around the child and around the family, and it's really accessible. It's something lots of people could do, and it's often really fun because the kids are on their best behaviour because they want to have a fun weekend with you.
This is 2020 with Neil Johnson, helping you make sense of life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision Christian Radio.
Mary, I don't want to sugarcoat all of this, and I know you don't either. The thought that foster caring is easy, this is not an easy thing. It takes an awful lot of wisdom, perhaps a fair bit of experience even as a parent to be able to take on some children, because it's just not easy, is it?
Yeah, fostering, I think, like any time we step out to do something for God, it comes with its challenges. Probably the two biggest challenges in fostering is you're working with a state government who's the parent. So you've got a corporate parent that is part of that child's life and becomes part of your life. And there's that's wisdom and prayer and patience and understanding the system you're navigating. Requires often a lot of advocacy for your child and what's best for them. and understanding that, from a Christian perspective, none of these children, it's not God's plan for them to be removed from their birth families. So there's a whole lot of brokenness there, and there's a system that's trying to navigate that brokenness. And then the other really tricky thing is kids are only removed because they've experienced trauma, neglect, broken attachments. And so you've got a child that needs a special kind of care to navigate those trauma behaviours. And we at Fostering Hope, actually, on our website, you'll find a free trauma awareness training. It's very basic entry level, but we encourage people to do that as they're thinking about the journey. But it's also available for teachers, footy coaches, drama teachers, anyone working with children and young people. And I'd say I'm a better parent because of the journey. I've had to learn what my kids need and be much more intentional about that as a result.
You know, being a parent to a traumatised child, for some, that's going to be too big an ask. Others are going to say, well, I'm ready to put my best foot forward. The foster care system, it's designed to protect children, isn't it? And, when you've got maybe the biological parents, the government as a co-parent, as you put it, and then your own parenting in the mix, you're juggling a lot of, I guess, rules and regulations in there too, but I guess you're thinking of the child's. And sometimes it's easy, isn't it, to sort of blame the child and some behavioural issues and the trauma that they've experienced. The children are not to blame, are they? They're the ones we actually reach out to with loving arms. How do you describe the relationships between all the ones involved?
Yeah, so ideally you'd want everyone working on a team around what's best for the child, but that's not always possible. So it's really putting the children's needs right at the centre and making sure that's you're advocating for that, and being aware of. I did a great training on the rod in my own eye. So even what am I bringing to those conversations? What am I my attachments to that child and my care and my own needs? Being aware of what I'm bringing that could be a problem as well, and really putting the child at the centre and working with the team. And there's an opportunity also there to be a blessing to all those people involved as well. Trauma, I want to encourage people to not be scared about the trauma behaviours. Go on a journey if you want to do this, learning about it and finding out more. And also that we have an opportunity, like when I do my trauma training, even if we mess up, we can say sorry and we can fix it and we can get it right next time. And that's huge for a child that may never have had an adult see that. So we're going to mess up, we're going to get it wrong. Let's keep learning and trying to get the right resources so that we can be the best parent possible.
When a child who has been exposed, traumatised to a lot of things that, unsavoury things we don't even like talking about, the way they're affected, though, Mary, when a child is traumatised, is it like they're rejected, they're cut off, disenfranchised, they don't know where they belong. I mean, how do you describe what a lot of children go through in the traumatic experience of a dysfunctional upbringing or their family, and then what a new foster parent might need to be aware of?
Yeah, so I think it's being really aware of the age of the child and what we often don't know what trauma they've experienced, but in utero trauma, so exposure to drugs and alcohol or family violence or highly stressful situation and trauma that happens in that first couple of weeks of life. Research shows now that impacts the brain and the way the brain's actually developed. And that's quite different to trauma that a child might experience or feel from the age of 2+. So being aware of what you're dealing with, is this something where we can walk alongside the child and support them change behaviours and change responses, or is it something that's more neurological? And getting people to relate to what's their own experience. So if our children are often living in what we call a survival state, so they're living in, because they've been brought up in a home that might be chaotic and never knowing what's going on, attachments that are like a parent that might be there sometimes and not there sometimes. So their brain is constantly looking alert. What's going to happen? What's safe? What's unsafe? And for any of us, we're stressed and someone asks us a question, we can't think straight. We don't know the answer. So relating it to what's going on in their body, what goes on in our body when we're stressed, and having some empathy for that. And often, just like all of us, all we want is someone to come alongside and say, it's all right, let's work this out together, and we can calm that brain back down.
A Foster Care Sunday coming up, 14th September, always the second Sunday in September, coincides with National Child Protection Week and National Foster Carers Week too, the first 2 weeks of September. The number of churches, Mary, we've been talking about this for some years. No doubt there'll be some who are thinking, oh yeah, we did something like this in our church last year. The number's growing. How does it look that churches are doing what we used to call Stand Sunday and now like Foster Carer Sunday? What's happening with churches?
Yeah, and thank you so much for Vision's support of Foster Care Sunday. So at the moment, the Foster Care Sunday is organised by Fostering Hope and a couple of other Homeward Projects and ARC, so a couple of other similar organisations to Fostering Hope around Australia. And unfortunately, we don't know the data. So because we put the video up there, which should hopefully be up by the end of this week, we put the kit up there, we put a sermon outline and a prayer, and we trust churches are taking it up. I know I'm based in Tasmania, so what we found really encouraging is when a whole denomination takes it up. So we know the Baptist churches and the Anglican churches in Tasmania, they all have it on their church calendar. And it can look like a whole sermon, or it can look like a prayer, or showing the Foster Care Sunday video. It's whatever works for all the different churches we have in Australia.
Mary, let's hear from a caller calling in from Queensland. Hello, welcome along.
Good morning.
Hi there. What are your thoughts about foster caring?
Look, I really take my hat off to the foster caring community. I'm not one. I'm actually calling to ask a question from the other side of the fence, so to speak.
Yep.
I have multiple children who've gone through domestic and family violence, as have I, and also have neurodivergence, which further complicates the situation. My question for Mary is, I was just hoping she might be able to give some direction or information for people like myself who are proactively supporting and advocating for their children. I'm at the stage now with one of mine who is currently still at home. I've still got 3 at home. My teenage son who is has been beginning to perpetrate the violence that he's been exposed to. I'm being proactive with reaching out to community organisations, DV support, and also psychologists and that sort of thing. What happens when a parent is doing all they can to support their child, but they actually come to a point where they get to the point where it's negatively impacting themselves and the other children in the home and their safety, and there doesn't seem to be anything apart from going to the extreme of foster care or resi care, which is obviously there's some beautiful foster carers, and you hear stories about not so good situations. I'm just wondering if there's somewhere that Mary could direct parents like myself in this situation who is doing above and beyond all that they can.
Okay. Let's hear from Mary. When you're a parent at your wit's end and that dysfunction has been a part of your own family life. For our caller who's called in anonymously, what are your thoughts, Mary?
Yeah, thank you for calling. And that's just sounds like a really tough situation. And I just want to honour your humility in calling and wanting to find a solution. So I'm not fully aware in Queensland what services are out there. I know Australian Childhood Foundation have some great training on how to equip yourself when violence. And as you said, if you've got psychologists, something like a headspace where that your eldest can start getting that support. I'm trying, even though I don't know if he's engaged in school or not engaged in school, but if there's an outside of school, we have a down here in Tasmania, we have like a bike program where there's men supporting kids like that in fixing bikes and selling bikes. So something that's hands-on and constructive around some positive role models might be a really helpful situation. And then, the support you can put around your younger children so they can understand what's going on, which it sounds like you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back. Yep. What would you like to add?
I was just going to say he is engaged in school, and I am liaising with school. I think the biggest challenge is he's refused to engage with psychology or any support for the last year or so, and is completely ignorant or not owning any of his behaviour. It's a lot of deflection and blame. And so if they won't engage with psychology or any supports like that, we seem to be falling between the cracks that have been for many, many years. But it's now at a point where, I know that a difficult decision may need to be made, but I was just wondering, as well as engaging, there's Act for Kids and those sorts of things we've got in Queensland here. I just, when someone in my position is told, like, you're not abusing your child, you're not neglecting them, there's no substance abuse, it's like we don't seem to fall into the right category to need the crisis help. Is there anything that you could add, Mary, in terms of finding Christian foster carers, in terms of potentially needing respite or something like that? Is there a special thing in that regard, or is it just there's a foster care system and it's the luck of the draw, so to speak?
Mary?
So for yourself, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
So, foster carers will go to any foster care agency to do the training and assessment and approval. What we do quite often is if you find someone that you think would be a great respite carer for your situation, they can be assessed and go through their training as what's called kin respite. So they're only respite for your family. So they're not going through the training and then could be open to any child. And that works really well. And it's that whole extended family. But they're safe and they're approved and they've gone through all the right training. So if there's someone in your church community or your school community that you think would be a great respite carer, encouraging them to go through that, but only attached to your family. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thank you very much, Mary.
And I want to thank you, that anonymous caller, calling in and sharing your heart with us today and just illustrating, doesn't it, Mary, that this isn't easy and it's happening even within homes which are not with foster children, but parents who are struggling with raising their own children, and the various background that has been there that's brought that sort of dysfunction, and there's that a trauma that can be in any family. That's very, very encouraging, though, because the thought that there can be some level of respite. And is this something that even happens, say, in a local church context, when there is a family that's struggling with their own children, that oftentimes there can be people who can offer some level of respite care for that parent or drawing alongside their children? Does this happen, do you think? Have you seen this sort of thing happening widely in your community?
So I can speak for foster carers and kinship carers. So kinship carers are people that are known to the child before they enter care. And we encourage them to look at their church community, look at their community and think, who could be a respite carer in my community? Who could I ask to be part of this child's life? And we also run a mentoring program in Tasmania. So who could be a mentor for my child? And I encourage, particularly with foster and kids in out-of-home care, so foster kids or kinship cares, not to just ask someone to do it without having done the training and the screening. Go through an organisation and make sure all those police checks and everything are done and make sure everything's safe, because we know we've run into problems in the past with that.
All right. Thank you to that caller that called in and just sparked the conversation here. 1-800-316-316. If you'd like to join in our conversation, you can send us a text on 0447 488 316. And, before the news, Mary, I was saying, well, let's not sugarcoat this. Actually, this is hard work. And we've just had that demonstration of how hard this is. But let me just ask you, What do people fear most about taking a step to become a foster carer? Because until you deal with that fear, you're not going to put your hand up and say, okay, I think this is me, I need to step forward. What are people fearing most?
Yeah, so the two biggest things people fear is they could never give them back. And that was the conversation we were having earlier, which I think if you go into this with the motivation of I'm going to be a family for a child, not to get a child for my family, that can flip that, because it's not about giving them back, it's caring for them as long as they need a family and need that safe attachment. And that might be, for my situation, all three of my children I didn't expect to be long-term, and they've all been long-term. Or it could be for a couple of years and going home is a really positive thing. Or I was talking to a fostering family just yesterday who had a biological group of 4 children, and now the eldest lives with mum, the second eldest has a week of every school holidays with mum, and the third one has one weekend a month. And it's actually they're parenting those children together, and it's really positive, and it's what each child needs where they're at. And the other situation, the other thing people say is the impact on their own biological children is a real fear. And again, that's real and true. As the college is called in, even within biological families, if there's a child with high needs or a child that has big behaviours, that impacts other kids. So that's what I encourage people to go into it eyes wide open, talk to people about how they can support you, what support you might need, and learn as much as possible. And this year's Foster Care Sunday video is actually my 3 older boys sharing their journey. And again, it's not sugarcoating it, but fostering has been a positive experience for my 2 biological sons, and they've grown in their understanding of kids in need all over, all around them.
You know, it's easy, isn't it, to get mired down in some very, very sad and very hard stories, certainly for the children who need the foster care, but it does take its toll sometimes on the foster parents and on the family, and it is a risk that you are going to assess before you jump in, but that doesn't minimise the need that there is right now, because we spoke a little earlier and said things are at a crisis point when, losing more carers every year than able to retain. There's an absolute need for foster carers. Just come back to Foster Care Sunday for a moment here, because there might be people who are a part of a church and they're thinking, well, we don't have any foster carers in our church. The opportunity to just pause for a few moments and pray for children and young people, as well as their birth families, as well as their carers, and anyone who's even working in the system. What value do you see in the prayer side of things here, Mary? Because this is an opportunity. If you're not there on the front line, prayer is something very powerful here.
Oh, I totally agree, Neil. Yeah. So if we can, as a country, we can be praying for more than enough fostering families, for healing for every child, for the birth families, that they can find the healing and hope that they need. We've got to believe in that. Yeah.
Some people might be thinking, well, I want to do the nice and easy things, in serving my community in my local church. I could be the youth leader, or I could lead a home group, or, I could do this, that, or the other. But this seems to be one big step into the deep end. And for many, it'd be like a step of faith. There's a level of trust in God when you start to be a foster parent. How do you describe that sort of step of faith and the need to step out and you're jumping into territory that's untested?
Exactly like that. I think foster carers, kinship carers in our community, it's local mission. It's saying it's like going on the mission field overseas. It's going into the mission field here. It's welcoming brokenness into your home, and just like entering the mission field overseas, that requires prayer and support, encouragement, and to also faithfulness to keep going, to not give up when it gets hard, because healing takes time, and healing also isn't linear, but healing is possible and is incredible. And the Foster Care Sunday video this year, where you'll see my eldest son and one of my biological sons saying, yeah, before he came to live with us, he was just the naughty boy that went to the principal's office every week. And, within a year of living with me, he wasn't going to the principal's office every week. And that wasn't me doing very much. That was him being in a stable, loving home. The healing's been incredible to see who he is today.
You know what? It seems to be counterintuitive. I love your expression, though, welcoming brokenness into your home. Mostly we're trying to deal with how we get the brokenness fixed in our own homes. But there are fabulous, wonderful, committed people who are prepared to take that faith risk and welcome brokenness in because they want to see some level of healing for a child who might not have a chance. And if they go through the whole residential care situation, they may well emerge, in the worst case scenario. Hey, a text from Gary. Gary says, with fostering, how many people don't want to do it because they are scared the government agency will micromanage and disapprove of being of a Christian faith? I'm probably way off in that line of thinking. Sorry if I am. What are your thoughts here for Gary?
Yeah, great question, Gary, and one we probably should have addressed earlier. So, I guess because we're at crisis point, there's a need, and we can feel that need whether we have a faith or don't have a faith. So it's checking your motivation, being honest with the foster care agency when you're going through the approval process, that you have a faith, going to church on a Sunday is part of your rhythm, not hiding that as that's part of who you are, just like other carers will have different things that are part of their culture and their community. We can't go into fostering to convert children. That can never be our motivation. We're showing God's love to them, and obviously the rest of it's up to God. And there might also be placements that just aren't appropriate. So if there's a birth family that is very anti-Christian or doesn't want that as part of their child's upbringing, well, those children won't be placed in your home. On the other side, there's lots of birth families that have a faith and would love their children to be placed in a Christian home. So I just encourage people to be honest and open about it, and be willing to, maybe some social workers may have some hard questions to ask. And also, like we've talked about, being prayerful for that.
My suspicion is that a lot of people who do put up their hand to be a foster carer are motivated by a faith foundation in their life. When you are a part of the government system in child protection, you're probably coming across a lot of people who are coming with that faith foundation. What does it mean, though, where the rubber hits the road, Mary? I mean, can you take those children to church? To be part of Sunday school if they're in that sort of age group, or youth groups if they're in teenage years. Is there something happens here when the rubber hits the road with special regulations?
It is a case-by-case situation. So if it's a long-term care situation, and this is, so all my children have gone to church, all my children go to youth group, and it's just been an open conversation that this is part of how we do life. So I've never had any, and all the Christian carers I know haven't had any pushback. But like I say, if there is a situation where the birth family is very against that, have the conversation. And this is the same for all religions. There's really active Muslim community in Sydney that are finding foster carers in their own community because of children from the Muslim religion that are being removed. So it's the same in lots of communities across Australia. And just encourage people to be open and honest about it. Don't hide that from your social workers, and have the conversation. And back to your earlier point, the two main reasons people become carers is because of faith, and the second one is when they were growing up, they knew someone that was in care. So whether it was a friend at school or a next door neighbour, and they've then from a young age wanted to become a foster carer.
And interesting to reflect on what Gary was sharing in that text. I wonder whether the child protection system appreciates that there are Christian people who are motivated by their faith, who want to do good things for vulnerable families. And they may actually be pushing away the carers that are necessary because there are these regulations around the faith that can be transferred from parent to foster child. Hey, I just running short of time. I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about people who work in child protection, and I've known some over the years. And they work in something like, what might be akin to the most stressful situations, because they're dealing with dysfunction in such a way that children who are vulnerable, and they see the trauma firsthand. When you're having your special Foster Care Sunday, 14th of September, you're not only praying for children and their birth parents and the foster families, but what about the people who are working in the system? Because they're under huge pressure, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. They're under huge pressure. So they've potentially removed a child, which would be a terrible thing to have to do. They're managing the wants and needs of a birth family, the needs of a child, and also the foster carer as well. And they're trying to navigate what's best in a system that is regulated, that is a legal system with child protection orders and court orders. It's a highly stressful situation, and yes, our workers need a lot of prayer, a lot of encouragement. So even for foster care, around Foster Care Sunday and Foster Care Week, we encourage carers, how could they bless their worker that week? Could they write them a card? Could they give them a bunch of flowers? And actually show them that they're appreciated and they're seen at that time as well.
Well, we've got to wrap up our conversation here. Coming back to James 1:27, what it is, true religion, when we talk about visiting, caring for orphans and widows in their affliction and keeping oneself unstained from the world. When we talk about real practical Christianity, it isn't easy, and I think we've had a conversation over this past hour that demonstrates that there is a crisis need for foster caring parents who are willing to roll up their sleeves and even take a risk to be able to help a child who is in a very vulnerable situation. Coming up on Sunday, the 14th of September, you mentioned you can do this in a big way. You could devote the whole service to it, couldn't you, Mary? I imagine that most churches are not doing the whole service, but they're taking some time identifying people who might be involved in foster care or in child protection and being able to honour them, and then taking a moment to pray. So what would you hope people listening to our conversation today might take back to the leadership of their church and say, we should be doing something on the 14th of September?
Exactly that. Look at the Foster Care Sunday website. There's lots of resources there, and I say the video will be up by the end of the week. The past couple of years' videos are there, so you can have a look and a feel and ask your leadership, can we dedicate some time on that Sunday? And what I know is everyone I know who has taken a step to become a carer, it's not hearing it. It's not hearing an inspiring talk once, or it's seeds. It's hearing multiple things. It's meeting carers. It's talking to carers. It's praying about it until you're at the right stage of life where you can enter the journey. So keeping this on the church calendar every year is an opportunity to keep planting that seed, keep encouraging people. For young people in their churches, can they be thinking about, before they have their children, could fostering be part of their journey, and start praying about that as well?
It's sowing seeds, isn't it? Because it seems to be the problem's not going to get easier. It's likely to get worse. And there's going to be a huge need and a call upon people of faith in churches everywhere. And I know your work isn't just restricted to Hobart. You've got to reach all around Australia and all the states and territories, Mary. It's fostercaresunday.com is the website, and you'll be able to access that video coming up. And I think there's already some videos from previous years, but the new one that's coming out, I think Mary said it's coming out in a few days. The Fostering Hope website is fosteringhope.net.au, but to get some detail and some resources to be a part of Foster Care Sunday coming up on the 14th of September, fostercaresunday.com. and Mary Blake, Founder and Executive Officer for Fostering Hope. Mary, thanks so much for coming on and just being so open and telling us the hard things as well as the inspirational moments. Really appreciate your insights today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you so much for supporting Foster Care Sunday.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.